But how can we do fewer things, work at a natural pace, and obsess over quality? A good start would be to stop overcommitting. It is easy to overcommit, especially when we are always online and always inviting interruptions for a quick chat here or a quick call there, or yet another meeting that could have been an email. Welcome to Urelevant, the podcast that is all about helping you find relevance in the economy of now. I'm Mike Wheeler, author, entrepreneur, and online instructor, and now here's this week's episode of Urelevant. Here we are now in the final of our 3-episode series on the Wright brothers, where we have drawn parallels and principles that the Wright brothers employed to succeed in an untried and unknown endeavor to create something new and change the world. And the world is changing more rapidly than ever with the constant breakthroughs of AI, and in the previous 2 episodes, we explored principles 1 through 5 and then 6 through 10. So I'd encourage you to start with the episode entitled Skeptics at Kitty Hawk, followed by Doubters in Dayton, before this concluding episode in the 3-part series with this episode, which is entitled Flight Fanatics in France. And as a reminder, for this 3-part series, I've referenced David McCullough's book, The Wright Brothers. And here is that book. I recommend that to you. And I've got links down below of all the books that I recommend down in the description and show notes. So be sure and check that out as well. And if you are still here in this episode, that tells me you are ready for Wright Brothers principle number 11, which is that they sacrificed. The brothers hailed from Dayton, Ohio, and over the span of 4 years, they made the trek to Kitty Hawk, North Carolina multiple times. Rather than testing their flyers in their hometown, they chose Kitty Hawk because of its ideal wind conditions, soft sand, and nearby water for emergency landing options. Their accomplishments didn't come easy. In fact, leading up to their first successful flight in 1903, the brothers first traveled to Kitty Hawk in 1900. They would make a total of 5 round trips, resulting in over 7,000 miles traveled by train. There were stretches in their journey where they had to travel by boat as well. They endured a hurricane during their 1901 trek, along with historic mosquito outbreaks that year as well. Orville wrote back home to his sister Catherine to describe the ordeal trying to camp in tents on their journey during this mosquito outbreak. I'm quoting once again from this book and reading from it. Our blankets then became unbearable, writes Orville. The perspiration would roll off of us in torrents, and we would partly uncover, and the mosquitoes would swoop down upon us in vast multitudes. We would make a few desperate and vain slaps and again retire behind our blankets. Misery, misery. So once they would arrive in Kitty Hawk each year with their supplies, they would have to build their own hangar for their gliders and for themselves to shelter in, often against the backdrop of inclement weather. Their endeavors not only came with a cost to their comfort, but it also cost them in other areas as well. There were relationship costs with time away from their family. It cost them the comfort of the familiar as well. And often the best battlefields to wage war on the untried are far afield and not in your own backyard. They also had to delegate the day-to-day operations of their bicycle shop, which was funding their pursuits. And their most valuable resource of time was spent in countless hours in false starts, dead ends, delays, disappointments, and these are all bitter pills to swallow for sure. Yet that sacrifice played out in the moments that mattered most are the strongest antidote to the singular emotion or result you must chase away at all costs. That emotion is a cancer which will rot you away from the inside. That emotion I refer to is regret. There are once-in-a-lifetime opportunities and high callings to act. There is a clarion call to get off of the bus to delusion and disappointment and to change direction or pivot. This AI pivot we face today may come at a cost for you as well. There may be sacrifice, whether comfort, the familiar, relationships, and time, but once safely out of the danger zone and at a better vantage point, you will find you can harness this durable skill framework to your advantage and soar to new heights. Focus on the process along the way. Find meaning in the methods and set no expectations on others, and especially not on immediate outcomes. Much like Thomas Edison, you are experimenting and need to reframe failure as simply eliminating another approach that didn't work and reassessing to decide next steps. Recognizing that your process is bringing you one step closer to your unique, perfect place. It is much like a game of hot and cold. It isn't personal. You have to move to get signals if you're getting closer to or farther from your goals. The static are at a standstill for fear of hearing the word cold and being ridiculed by others. But that lack of movement will cause you to stagnate, forever hiding in tepid mediocrity. To quote the band Laney's song, Home is Where the Heart Is, quote, "What good is it to dream if we aren't going to move our feet?" Now, to apply this principle number 11 of they sacrifice to your own station in life, I encourage you to embrace sacrifice to avoid regret. It is definitely the lesser of the two discomforts of which only one can be avoided, so choose wisely. Now on to Wright Brothers principle number 12, which is that they rested in the face of intense competition. And for this principle of resting, I want to revisit a book I recommended in the first episode of this three-part series. That book, again, is Slow Productivity by Cal Newport. And here is Slow Productivity once again. Great book. I recommend that. Link down below in the description as well. And so one of his principles in slow productivity is to work at a natural pace. And it can seem impossible to work at a natural pace in our high-paced world. And believe me, I've had to learn this principle over and over as I've worked myself to a crisp on several occasions. Looking back on those times of extreme work, much of what I was doing really wasn't that important in the grand scheme of things. And so choosing that which matters most and doing fewer things, which is another slow productivity principle in the book, is how you can truly focus on quality, and that is how you can stand apart from the crowd. But how can we do fewer things, work at a natural pace, and obsess over quality? A good start would be to stop overcommitting. It is easy to overcommit, especially when we are always online and always inviting interruptions for a quick chat here or a quick call there, or yet another meeting that could have been an email. The Wright brothers were indeed racing the clock back in their time as well. Being the first to flight was an important distinction. Their legacy would be lost if they were second to accomplish manned flight. And yet they rested in the face of intense competition and at the potential expense of their legacy. And I've reflected on my own worst decisions as I've made them, and there is a common culprit that has successfully nudged me into unforced errors over and over. And that culprit is what I like to call the ticking clock. The ticking clock guilt trips you to say yes to commitments you should say no to. And there's a personal productivity cottage industry and pervasive grind culture that fills your heads with toxic math. That math goes something like this. If I made this much money working 2,000 hours last year, I should see a 50% increase in my income this year if I work 3,000 hours. The problem with time is it is fluid and not a one-to-one proportional ratio. It is also finite, and our bodies and especially our minds need time to recharge. We need a change of scenery and to use various parts of our brains to experience the unlock. And the Wright brothers were not entirely unaware of others that also were working long and hard to achieve liftoff first. And yet they chose to take Sundays off. And this we know from their journals and press reports. We all know the exhortation to work smarter and not harder, yet we fool ourselves to think the toxic math somehow works in our favor if we work both smarter and harder. How can we actually work less and accomplish more? We do that by keeping sight of the mission of these machines, be they bikes or airplanes or computers or cell phones or now AI, all the central players and the cast of the third industrial revolution and pivoting into this fourth industrial revolution are supporting roles to advance humanity forward and to serve us and not the inverse. We have gotten it twisted and upside down, where our devices and notifications dictate the terms and demand our attention right now. We will either use the tools on our terms or be used by them on theirs. And you know what that means. We become the tools, and we don't want to be there. And I have an issue with an oft-recited phrase nowadays called human in the loop as it relates to AI, sometimes acronymed as HITL, human in the loop. This may be well-intentioned, but I see it more as virtue signaling of a supposed ethical use of AI, as in, don't worry about AI taking over, we will keep humans in the loop. That tone casts us aside as an afterthought, though, and once again relegating us as digital prisoners used on their terms instead of our own. Do we as humans really want to be framed as an afterthought, doled out as a concession here or there? To me, human in the loop is the wrong way of framing our way forward. It should be keeping AI in our loop and not simply paying lip service and swallowing yet more empty promises made by our aspiring AI overlords. You are in control, and you can and should unplug. And you can call the shots as well. AI is yet another tool to serve us. So use the tool or become the tool. Your competition is not other companies, customers, or professionals. It's yourself. It's not about keeping the human in the loop, but you are the eye of the storm, and these various tools and tech are kept in the loop to serve you as needed. They are the tools, not you, never you. So to apply principle number 12, which is resting in the face of extreme competition to your own station in life, I recommend that you invert how you have been operating. I can boil this down to a single word for you to remember, and that word would be pull. Pull, not push. Pull the work and notifications and things to do on your terms and not your devices, tools, and tech. Pull, not push. Be proactive and not reactive. Remember, grace over grind. Take measured steps and think in terms of an hourglass, like the one over my shoulder if you're watching this on video. And as a quick aside, I encourage you to, of course, subscribe to the Urelevant YouTube channel in addition to subscribing to this podcast. But take a measured hourglass approach instead of a stopwatch mindset. AI affords you this luxury because you can literally 100x your productivity once you know how to use AI effectively. I've often said that with the help of AI, hours become seconds. So save time by offloading the menial and mundane to AI and reclaim those hours saved to rest and recharge. Now on to Wright Brothers principle number 13. They survived tragedies and respected the scars reminder. What is well known is that the Wright brothers were the first to flight, but lesser known is the story of the first plane crash fatality. Orville Wright was flying Lieutenant Thomas E. Selfridge on September 17, 1908 in Fort Myers, Virginia, on a demonstration flight which was attended by a crowd of some 2,600 people. Now, by this time, the Wrights had long since found fame, which began during their celebrated flights in France, which I'll go more into during principle number 15. But here, during this ill-fated flight, which I might add that the Wrights had advanced their planes to now seat 2 people by this point. Their plane suffered a mechanical failure in air and dove into the ground, killing Lieutenant Selfridge and badly injuring Orville. I bring up this story of the first flight fatality to open up relevant questions which we face today with our flights into the age of AI, and that being of ethics and personal responsibility. It is highly unlikely that the Wright brothers wrestled with the ethical implications of flight before they had achieved it. The thought of someone dying in a plane crash was as inconceivable to someone before the invention of airplanes as the concept of a traffic fatality before the invention of the automobile. And Orville not only lived through the first fatal plane crash, but also experienced the blessing and curse to have lived long enough to see his invention used to transport and drop atomic bombs just a couple of generations from their first flight. The atomic bomb and its development were explored in the Academy Award-winning Christopher Nolan film Oppenheimer, based on the Pulitzer Prize-winning book American Prometheus by Kai Bird and Martin J. Sherwin. A link down below in the show notes as well. And so much like the Wright brothers, J. Robert Oppenheimer brought forth a new era, the atomic era, and he leveraged the Wright brothers' flight era as a foundation for delivery of his breakthrough. And that is a commonly recurring theme of breakthroughs in general and inventions, is that they stand on the shoulders of their predecessors. And our advancements as a human race, having reached such great heights and standing on the shoulders of such significant predecessors, naturally opens up new and previously unimagined ethical questions and concerns. The realization of Oppenheimer and the theme of the film is that in some ways their world had already been destroyed, or at least life as they knew it, regardless of whether there was actual nuclear annihilation on a global scale or not. The fact that that was even a possibility and within humankind's grasp meant that the pre-nuclear age of innocence had been lost, which leaves tough questions of philosophy to grapple with. Namely, is this new technological advancement for the greater good? Will more people benefit than suffer from this advancement? And with that question in mind, I want to revisit the start of this series 2 episodes ago and the analogy from which we began. When a tree falls in the forest, the only ones to care are those whose view is improved and the unfortunate ones the tree falls on. Is it the greater good if the view of many improves but at the expense of the few? I guess it boils down to who you ask, and that's why these significant advancements can be so polarizing, whether flight or nuclear power or today the ushering in of AI, ready or not. These are advancements so consequential that to first do no harm is an impossibility. The ethics are a forever debate, way above most of our pay grades, but I will attempt to wrap up my answers to these ethical questions posed at the end of this episode during our final principle. But to return back to this one, the Wrights did suffer, and Orville had scars and limps and aches in his broken and mended bones to serve as the scars reminder that not every day of flying will be a good one. And on those days, you are left to second guess and grapple with survivor's guilt and determined to emerge to do better and to respect the scars reminders, which leads us to our next principle, which is Wright Brothers principle number 14, which is always striving, never arriving, also known as continual improvement or continual daily improvement. A strange thing happened once the Wrights achieved flight. They built a better flyer, and then they built a better one, and then another one, continually improving upon their prior designs. So I want to restate a previous mantra, and that is that technology never stands still. And that same seeking of improvement was at their core and predates their Kitty Hawk success. That continual improvement push is what led them to Kitty Hawk in the first place. The Wright brothers had previously written to the Smithsonian Institution for any and all books on flight that they could get their hands on. They also wrote to weather stations across the United States to gather data related to wind and weather conditions, seeking optimal conditions for their experiments. They gathered whatever data they could and then created their own data by relentless testing, whether it be their homemade wind tunnels or test flights in gliders. What I recognize in the Wright brothers is what today we call a beginner's mindset. And this is so important for us today as we advance in our own abilities. We mustn't grow complacent or view ourselves as experts. None of us are experts with AI yet. It is simply too early. The Wright brothers were driven to set records which were destined to be broken, yet they went about setting them and breaking them just the same. In the AI era, the tech will change and leapfrog, and although none of us know how this era will play out, we can draw clues from the birth of the internet. So I described the birth of the internet as a slower pivot in episode 1 of Urelevant, entitled My Pivot Story. If you want to learn more about what it was like when the internet came along, be sure and check out that episode. But taking clues from how things played out with the birth of the internet, we should see similar things happen in this age of AI, and I feel good about making these predictions related to AI. Rest assured that there will be a large number of AI-related certifications that are either here already or are coming soon. These AI-related certifications will begin with the baseline entry point for beginners to establish a certain level of understanding on the part of those who attain those certifications. You'll see more and more around AI essentials and fundamentals, as well as certifications related to prompt engineering, where you will need to understand the different types of prompts and their purposes and use cases. Think of these upcoming certifications as answers to the question, what is AI and why should I care? As an online instructor who has created certification courses around a lot of different exams, I can assure you that having certifications does make a difference and open doors when it comes to recruiters and hiring managers. I see no reason why the world won't race down the path of certifications as it relates to AI as well. In addition to AI certifications, there will be many new career paths emerge that do not exist today. One emerging path is that of prompt engineering. Some dismiss the crafting of prompts as easy and say that anyone can write prompts, but the same can be said of books. Many think that anyone can write a book, yet few do. The problem with communications is that communicating effectively is elusive and everyone thinks they can do it naturally. Where I see this heading is a connection between advancing tech and that advanced tech giving rise to more complex and specialized skills. Limitations with memory and computing power today will continually be overcome and improved, and the prompts that you can be entered or trained upon by AI will grow larger and larger, and this will make prompting more powerful and much more complex. So prompt engineering will be a recognized discipline and skill and career path. I envision a day in the not-too-distant future where universities will be offering degrees related to prompt engineering, but much like other tech, you can forego the college experience and race towards certifications and employment much sooner than that if you elect to do so. But I also want to address the importance of communication in general. When you think of your inputs into AI to get out more effective and useful outputs, your ability to communicate becomes more readily apparent and so important. And this, once again, is why soft skills, or what is now being referred to as durable skills, are growing in importance with executives and companies. I would like to underscore the importance of communication with a quote from Vincent van Gogh, which I recently ran across from a book on his complete paintings. In that book here, Van Gogh, The Complete Paintings, and that quote, we spend our whole lives in unconscious exercise of the art of expressing our thoughts with the help of words. We ought to write letters that demand our whole attention and on which our fate may depend every day. It is for such reasons that men of significance invariably write well. And so this concept of writing well, communicating well, this harkens the skills graph. And I spoke in the previous episode about the skills graph, and it will be a massive breakthrough once mastered. And to the winner go the spoils at the corporate level. But to apply this to your own station in life, strive to find your own unique coordinates on the skills graph and navigate your way to your uniquely optimal position. From there, you can leverage the skills graph in your favor with the right combination of marketable and suddenly sought after skills. That is what relevance looks like, and that gives you leverage, and the fulcrum of this is your pivot. I will share much more on the skills graph in the next episode of Urelevant, so be sure to subscribe. But to wrap up principle number 14, always striving, never arriving, or continual improvement, never arriving is more than okay. It is, in fact, ideal. It's a game of hot and cold, and movement and action beats standing still stagnation. I started to unpeel the ethical onion layers in principle number 13, and here in our final principle, my goal is to summarize all previous principles into one final principle for you to set your own flight plan into the age of AI, and that is to always strive to become the bringer of the greater good. The Wright brothers didn't chase accolades. Fame and fortune were not what drove them, but those were an eventual byproduct of their success. Their initial achievements were not taken seriously, thus the names of the previous episodes of Skeptics and Kitty Hawk and Doubters in Dayton. It wasn't until the Wright brothers held flight demonstrations in France to much acclaim and fanfare did their hometown take notice and celebrate their sudden hometown heroes. You see, few people care about what you accomplish, but everyone cares if your accomplishments do something for them. What the Wright brothers did for Dayton was they put their hometown ostensibly on the map. This endeared them to those they knew well, and when they were starting out, it was hard for the locals to take them seriously. It is a strange phenomenon as old as time. As they say, a prophet is not welcome in their hometown. And oftentimes, that which we hold as common, we eventually change our tune to "we knew them when" if one of our neighbors goes on to great fame. You will see this play out every season on American Idol, in fact, when the top 3 finalists return to their hometown parade of fanfare. It's not uncommon for these 3 finalists to report that they were an outcast in school or a loner, and now suddenly everyone wants to be their friend, or they receive the keys to the city from their mayor. So odd, yet so predictable. And, we are really simple as a human race, always have been and always will be. We often don't take notice or recognize the significance of something until we see a commotion being made, and we don't want to appear out of the loop. The Wright brothers kept after it and didn't give up when their initial flights drew no interest. And this is why it is so important not to be driven by results, but the process, because initial reactions to what you have to offer to the world may be mixed, which can lead to disappointment, especially in the early days of the AI era that we're in, because so few people are even aware of what AI is and few even care. And over time, this will become more and more relevant. Becoming the bringer of the greater good does mean asking yourself, as you're pursuing these things, what is in it for them and not simply what's in it for me. The Wright brothers developed flight fanatics in France with their accomplishments because they were so good at what they did. They grew to where they simply could no longer be ignored. And for this, I want to mention another book recommendation, and this one, once again, is by Cal Newport, who did Slow Productivity as well. This one is called So Good They Can't Ignore You. Love that title. And I think the subtitle is really relevant to our discussion here in these episodes. And that subtitle for this particular book is Why Skills Trump Passion in the Quest for Work You Love. And that being skills are more important than passion. You have to become good at something using skills you develop over time and become so good that you can no longer be ignored. And your goal is to be the hero's facilitator and not the hero yourself. You want them thinking along the lines of, you're putting us on the map, much like the Wright brothers did for Dayton. This mindset of what's in it for them and becoming the bringer of the greater good means you will strive to be a problem solver, not a problem creator. And problem solving is the intersection of hard and soft skills. It is where they meet, and this should be your target moving forward into the unknown of AI. And so that's a wrap on these 15 principles from the Wright brothers. Thank you for investing your time with me here on Urelevant. So be sure to join me in the coming weeks as we fly into the future of AI and discover the skills graph, problem solving, new AI jobs and career paths, and a whole lot more only here on Urelevant.